Teal from the Texas Travel Industry Association. Mr. Teal.
Awesome. Up here?
Welcome. Yes,
Perfect.
please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members. I'm here because I'm thrilled to be here tonight to make a special presentation to one of your great local folks here working on behalf of the travel and tourism industry. I am David Teal. I am president, let me get this out of the way, president and CEO of the Texas Travel Industry Association. We're based in Austin. We are the umbrella organization for travel and tourism industry in Texas, which means we represent every public and private sector branch of the travel and tourism industry that you can imagine. Our mission is to advocate on behalf of our industry, but also to educate those who work in our industry. We like to have the most competent, the most professional tourism folks that we can have in our communities across the state. Tonight, I'm here to make a special presentation to one of those folks who happens to work in Nacogdoches, Sherry, who's with us, Sherry Morgan. Sherry has completed what is probably our most rigorous education offering, which is called Travel and Tourism College. It's a commitment. It's a week-long program, pretty intensive. It's a 3-year commitment. We have a lot of folks who sign up for it but don't quite make that whole 3-year commitment. And when you do complete that 3-year commitment, there is also a capstone project, which is pretty onerous for some folks. A lot of folks don't completely graduate the course because they never finished their capstone. Sherry did. Sherry's capstone project is sitting on the carpet in front of her. I'll let her talk about her capstone project, but I just wanted to come and personally present this to Sherry tonight on behalf of the Texas Travel Industry Association, to commend her for her commitment, her professionalism. It's exciting to know that we have someone of Sherry's caliber and commitment working in your city, your community, to help this industry grow and to help your community prosper through travel and tourism, and to commend the city for supporting her efforts in doing that. So thank you all very much, and if I could ask Sherry to join me up here, I'll make this little presentation and say
Absolutely.
thank you all. Congratulations, Sherry.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll take this for you. I guess everybody knows Charlie.
Sherry, did you want to say anything about your project?
Not sure.
It looks like a very busy project.
It's a very busy project, and one that I really thought was going to be just to complete my capstone project. I really didn't ask permission. I funded it myself because it was a personal project that I brought with me, and I never imagined that the community would have embraced it with such a full and loving heart and really understand the value of what Charlie can bring. So yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to serve the city and to exercise creativity, because there's a lot of places where that wouldn't be encouraged. So I do appreciate it and I value it.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Teal.
Thank you.
No one has signed up for open forum this evening? Okay. Then we move on to our consent agenda. If any council member would like to remove something for a comment or question, if not, the chair would entertain a motion.
Can I
for
make a couple
approval.
comments? I don't think we need to remove them, but it's,
Yes.
yeah, I just, on the minutes, I went back and watched about the subdivision, and I wanted to put in there that the applicant, that our city planner has said that the applicant has promised to preserve the perimeter trees, and I wanted that to be in the record as part of the minutes that was done. And I wanted to ask so that was A, and then as far as B, the piece of property that we're selling at 314 Church Street. Now, I wanted to ask about that because that's in the floodplain. And I don't know whether the city has been in the a habit of trying to pick up pieces of property that are in the floodplain at $3,400 for an existing residence in the floodplain. I don't know whether we tried to do that. We don't have any program for trying to, when a floodplain property comes available, getting it cheap?
No, sir.
Okay. And the other question is, can that house be remodeled legally, or is it like it just has to stay in its condition, and as it deteriorates at some point, it will be removed as a habitable structure in the floodplain?
Do we have any staff here that are familiar with the condition of the house? Saved by the bell.
Ms.
Mayor and
Bartlett?
Council, Steve Bartlett, City Engineer. Generally, the house is not habitable as it is and has been condemned. In floodplain areas, not floodway areas, but in floodplain areas, structures can be rebuilt, but if more than 50% of the value of the house is spent on the rebuild, then they have to be brought up to comply with all the rules. In this case, it would be raising a finished floor, for example, or something that might be well impractical in this. So in this case, I don't believe there's a chance of rebuilding the house as it sits.
What do you think why would somebody want to buy a piece of property that's unbuildable, that's in a floodplain?
I don't know that I know the answer to that, other than parking area or expand their lot, in the area, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could, council member, the NISD is the keeper of those properties that have been taken possession of typically by the 3 governmental entities for failure to pay taxes. And then they have a tax firm that routinely goes through those properties, and then after a certain threshold is passed, then they put those properties up for sale. Since the city is a part owner of that property and we get our pro rata share of back taxes, then that's why it comes before City Council for confirmation. But just as a little bit of background information on the process.
We may want to consider, if we wanted to begin to protect our floodplains, that when a piece of property like that becomes available for $3,400, that we, just purchase it and let it be floodplain. So I don't know if we'd want to do that or not.
And unless there's an objection from the council, we'll take a hard look at that and bring something back for council consideration.
But it's
at a
too
later
late
time.
for that piece of property, right?
No, council could say no. I hate to defer to the city attorney, but if we say no and the other taxing entities say yes, just 2 words, is the sale finalized, or do all 3 entities have to agree?
First, I can't in 2 words, but what? Just very briefly, and a good question, Councilmember Moore. What this probably is a situation is, it's been taken in foreclosure. The amount to be satisfied during a sale literally on the courthouse steps probably didn't bring bids that satisfied this amount. When that happens, then the entity actually takes it back, and then the firm that the city has employed or that works through the Central Appraisal District and represents the city and county, and then the school district has a separate firm. They'll do their best to try to market that lot, and that's probably what we have here, is that the lot, the value of the lot was such, as Mr. Bartlett said, that the structure on it's not sound, that it probably may not be bringing what the taxes actually are owed on it. And in that situation, then it's tried to be sold, and the entities agree to that lesser amount to try to make it a productive property back on the tax rolls, to be a useful property instead of sitting there with a condemned building on it, or not a productive piece of property. So that's probably what they have. The situation here is, if we didn't approve it, well, that would probably hold up the sale.
Mm-hmm. Well, the issue is this is for $3,400. That's a pretty low price to begin to, chip away at protecting our floodplain, especially right downtown area like that. And, we spend a lot of money on a lot of things, and that's less than a rounding error of our budget. So I wish we had thought about that. I guess it's too late to do that now, but I'd hate to see somebody come in there, tear that house down, and build a new house that's in the floodplain but is elevated, because even elevated houses in floodplains cause problems. But I'm sure nobody else would be interested in doing that, so I'm not gonna move forward.
Well, I think it's interesting to have a conversation about it in the future, though. So as Mr. Jeffers suggested, staff could look at something like that, and maybe we could have a presentation on what would be involved in that and what it looks like. But not to cherry pick this out, to go ahead and approve it this evening, but I think it is something
Well,
reasonable to look at and discuss.
And we've had we've had presentations on floodplains before, and we've had projects built in floodplains and floodways, violation of the code probably. And the other one, I just wanted to say something about city litter pickup. I drive down Press Road a lot, and maybe the reason Press Road isn't included in the litter pickup is because rather than being litter, it's more like a linear dump. And I mean, there's, TV sets, couches, construction debris. I mean, people throw out bags of trash and they get mowed over. And I don't know whether that is just above and beyond what this organization can be done, but I know that I've seen Kerry Walker down there at least twice, picking up trash and put up some signs asking people not to throw trash out. And the code enforcement folks were down there digging through the trash to try to get, and successfully got addresses of people that had thrown that trash out. So I don't know why Press Road isn't. It's a historic road along the railroad tracks. I don't know why that isn't included on that list. So it would be great if it wasn't dirty. So those are the three things I wanted to just talk about on the consent agenda.
Okay. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. For our regular agenda, we're going to start out with number 6, public hearing, proposed tax rate. And as a reminder, the proposed tax rate will be voted on by the City Council at the September 18th, 2018 meeting to be held here in the City Council chambers at 5:30 p.m.
Madam Mayor, since this is the second public hearing, I'm going to move through the slides relatively quickly. The current tax rate is a little bit over 59 cents. The proposed tax rate is almost 62 cents. This is going to generate $703,000. That's an estimate in the upcoming fiscal year that we don't currently have. The impact, and we always have to have a starting place to look at, so we just look at the average value of the home. That comes from the appraisal district, the average value home in Nacogdoches, and this includes homes that are over $1 million and probably homes that are worth just a few $1,000s, but that average comes out to about $86,000, and that is a annualized tax increase for the average homeowner of 21 cents. And as the mayor noted, this is the second public hearing, and the council will consider adopting a tax rate and at the September 18th meeting, as well as the budget, which we'll talk about momentarily. Madam Mayor, I will defer to public comment, then I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffers. Okay, I will now open the public hearing. If there is anyone here that would like to speak against the increased tax rate? Yes, sir.
My name is Larry Witt, and I was hesitant to come today to make a public comment about the proposed tax increase. Because you see, it was about this time last year that I spoke against the street maintenance fee. I was the only one who made a public comment of that first meeting of 2 public comments at that time. I was not able to attend the second public comment meeting as my elderly mother had fallen and was injured just hours before that meeting, so I couldn't come. I would have been there then too. And so the reason I'm hesitant to come here today is it seems that the maintenance fee was passed last year in a rubber stamp manner, and I feel that whatever I say today, speaking out against this tax increase, will not make any difference. But being born and raised in this city, I felt I had to say something. Last year, when I said the street maintenance costs should be paid from property taxes, I was told in that meeting that the fee was proposed because it would be risky to raise taxes because of an election would have to take place to pass increased taxes at that time. Risky because of an election. An election should tell you what your constituents want. Have an election, please. Now here I am, just a short year later, and we have both a street maintenance fee and likely a property tax increase all together within just 1 year's time. The citizens of this city are being burdened with high property taxes, street maintenance fees that will probably be raised in the future, along with very high water bills. The city needs to live within their means, just like the citizens have to live within their means. Most of these citizens have not seen raises in their salaries, and many fixed income people are not yet at the age of 65, where taxes are frozen. Further, the street maintenance fee is charged to all citizens, including the elderly over 65 years of age. And by the way, I live on a corner lot. Recently, contractors for the city worked on that side street by spraying all the cracks with some kind of liquid asphalt. Many of the cracks were not filled completely, and the many cracks were highlighted and made the street look very ugly and completely eliminated any curb appeal in the neighborhood. It's very unsightly. The street in front of my house is in far worse shape and has many potholes. That street was not even addressed. As far as the water rates are concerned, they are outrageous. The past month, I watered my yard twice a week, and I have separate meters, so I don't have to pay sewer on the sprinkler system. And the sprinkler bill was $233.29, and the bill in the house, which includes water, sewer, and garbage, was $102.05, making my total bill $335.35. I fail to see the justification of this level of charges, and I understand rates are going to go up again in October. Nacogdoches is the oldest town and is rich in history, yet I feel the city is not fully capitalized on tourist dollars. We have a niche here, and we need more creative ways to increase revenue besides raising taxes and charging fees. And that is your job, to be creative. Lufkin does it. Look at the refurbished Pines Theater. We could have had that same thing and even more with the main theater. A win-win negotiation with Goodwill to relocate them from another building close by could be opened up. That building could be a restaurant for moviegoers. There could have been concerts besides movies at the old main theater. Just a lit up main theater marquee would have added downtown appeal to Nacogdoches. Can you imagine a refurbished main theater to host the annual Nacogdoches Movie Festival? The main theater is just one example of a missed creative opportunity. Please do your job. Get creative, increase revenues without taking the easy way out by increasing taxes and creating new fees.
Thank you, Mr. Witt. Is there anyone else that would like to speak against the proposed increased tax rate? If not, is there anyone that would like to speak for the increased tax rate? Okay, hearing none. Public hearing is now closed. Mr. Jeffers.
I'll be happy to answer any questions that the council may have, Madam Mayor.
Council, any questions, comments, clarifications for Mr. Jeffers?
Mr. Witt, I I thought the same thing about the main theater and the Goodwill and how that would have made a fantastic movie theater and a restaurant. I agreed with that as an urban design issue. I thought that same thing. And I also like to comment what you made about, the comment you made about your water rates. And we spend a lot of money watering our yards. And I remember once, several years ago, I measured my water, and the days that I did not water, I used around 100 gallons a day. I'm single by myself. And the days I did water, which was minimal, just enough to keep the grass from growing, it was 2,500 gallons. So it's a huge amount of water that and it's all treated water. We have to take it out of the lake, we have to run it through our treatment plants, we have to pump it, and we water our yards. And other cities and areas that aren't as lucky to have the kind of natural rainfall we have zero scaping, in which people work to plant drought-tolerant plants, and that would be a good project or policy for us to look at ways to reduce our water bills and our water usage through different types of landscaping.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Is there someone from staff that can contact Mr. Witt about a couple of the other things he mentioned also?
Yes,
about
ma'am.
the
I'll
streets?
contact them.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to number 7, public hearing for the proposed 2018-19 budget.
This is the final public hearing on the budget, even though it is the final public hearing when City Council considers adoption at the upcoming City Council meeting in a couple of weeks. You continue to allow public comment by policy, and so anyone that wants to comment up through that process is more than welcome to do so. You've already seen this as we talked about property tax. The reason why we talk about those two items separately is because state law requires that they be talked about separately. Rate changes in water. When the City Council adopted a rate study 2 years ago, it was being phased in because of the amount of the increase on certain classifications of customers, and so this is the third of 5 years. The focus, not the focus, but a focus is that we're converting to minimum charges for meters. And the best way to compare that is many residential customers, they have a 5/8 inch meter or 1 inch meter, and Pilgrim's has meters that are larger than 6 cents, and the minimum charge was the same. Obviously, because of demand, just the size of the meter, the size of the infrastructure to serve the larger customer, we weren't in line with what the American Water Works Association recommends, and the rate study recognized that and said that we're going to go to a minimum charge based on meter charge to accurately distribute those costs amongst the users. For the vast majority of residential customers, if they have a smaller meter, the 5/8 inch meter, they're not going to see any increase in their water rates. Once again, this is year 3 of 5 in the rate increase. The industrial rate increase is going to go from $2.69 per thousand gallons to $2.89 per thousand gallons. Once again, the study noted a disparity. Industry is very important to this community, but they need to pay their share of what it costs to provide water, sewer, and other services. And so this is recognizing the infrastructure that we have to have in order to serve those larger customers. The rate changes in sewer, the minimum charge will increase approximately 2% for all increases, and the volume charge will increase 1% in all classes. And then the rate change in sanitation is a 5% increase. Looking at the general fund, I'm not going to belabor the point since we've been here before, and we have total operating expenditures of approximately $25 million. Looking at the utility fund, we have total operating expenditures of almost $15 million. There's quite a bit of those monies that are going to go into infrastructure projects to make sure the existing infrastructure is well maintained. Sanitation fund has proposed operating expenditures of about $4.5 million. You'll note that there are some, what appears to be some rather sizable reserves, but opening and closing sales to put, or actually we're entombing trash. The landfill has a liner on the bottom of it, and then when we close a cell, it has the liner on top of it. So the trash is literally entombed. This is in accordance with state and as well as federal regulations. There's even a process to capture the liquids that may gather on the bottom of those line cells and remove it, and to see that it is properly treated, so that if a liner were to fail, who knows how long in the future, that it would not pose a threat to the water sources. There's some parts of the state where that may seem like overkill. This is one part of the state to where it isn't overkill. Unfortunately, it is a pretty expensive process. Madam Mayor, after the public comment, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffers. Okay, I will now open the public hearing. So is there someone here that would like to speak against our proposed 2018-19 budget? Anyone wants to speak for? Yes. Mr. Smith. Dr. Smith.
Ms. Mayor, I don't know whether this is for or against.
Okay.
Jan, I'm Sammy Smith. And as you know, I was here 2 weeks ago talking about utility funds, and in specifics, the amount of utility funds that were used to support the general fund. Since then, I've done a little additional looking, and Mr. Jeffers, I would like to compliment you guys on this as a document, because in the last few days I have gone through several cities' budgets and their format. Yours is much less confusing and much less straightforward than most of the ones I looked at. But I do have some problems. I gave the city council members, and I think Mr. Jeffers, you have one too, fact. Based on data in this, page 12 and 16, there's $5,750,999 being transferred or budgeted to be transferred from the utility funds and the sanitation funds to the general fund. A fact, if you look at the graph on page 3 in this budget, it shows that 22% of the total revenue of the general fund comes from interfund transfers from the utility funds and the sanitation funds. If you look at the amount that's being transferred into the general fund compared to the other revenues in the general fund, that's 27.8% of the general fund revenue. The interfund transfer from the utility fund constitutes, if you look at the graph in this guy right here on page 12, 25% of the expenses of the utility fund, which is water and sewer, goes to interfund transfer. 25% of their expense is going into the general fund. Another fact, again, if you look at page 16 in the nice colored graph in this guy, 48% of the sanitation fund expense is transfers to the general fund. That bothers me a little bit, because what started me on this quest in the first place was the amount of the utility funds, water, sewer, sanitation, going to support the general operations of the city, and not specifically to the utilities upkeep operations, i.e. I'm paying more for my water than the water cost to produce. Just out of curiosity's sake, I said, what if I looked at some other cities to see what they're doing? And I grabbed one out of the air, the city of Lufkin. The city of Lufkin's, and I had to use their fiscal year 18 budget, which is last year's and our last year's, because I could not find their 19 budget anywhere. Anyway, in the city of Lufkin, 14.6% of the total revenue of the general fund goes, I'm not sure I said that right, 14.6% of the general fund revenue is interfund transfers from utility sanitation funds. That compares to the city of Nacogdoches, which is 22%. Obviously, we're significantly more than the city of Lufkin. Why, I don't know. If we exclude the interfund transfers from total revenue, just look at the other revenue comparisons, Lufkin's is 17.1% of the total, compared to the city of Nacogdoches, which is 27.8%. If you kind of look at a relationship there, based on the percents, the city of Nacogdoches is contributing 50% more on a proportion basis than the city of Lufkin, and 63% more if you use the other revenue figures. I don't understand that. I picked another city out of the air, primarily I think because I'm familiar with a little bit with the city because I have some relatives there, but the city of Gainesville. I looked at their budget. Their budget shows 13.07% of the general fund budget comes from the interfund transfers. Again, that compares to Nacogdoches, which is 22%. If you back out the interfund transfer from that revenue and just look at the other revenue comparison, Gainesville's is 15%, and ours is, whatever, I got it up there, 27.8%. Again, if you look at those proportions, ours, city of Nacogdoches, is 69% and 85% greater than the city of Gainesville. I don't understand why. I started to look at a lot of city budgets. Now, I was pulling my hair out. Luckily, I ran across some data where somebody had already done it for me. The Texas Municipal League in 2012 did a survey to determine how much cities' general funds were financed by interfund transfers from enterprise funds. Guess what they found? 7%. Nacogdoches is 22%. That's more than 3 times what the average, according to this survey from the Texas Municipal League. I don't understand that. I can't find anything in the city of Nacogdoches budget that supports a $5.75099 million charge for administrative overhead or whatever to operate utility funds. I won't mention the city, but I found one city's budget that was so convoluted that it was very difficult to figure out what they were even talking about. But I found one thing in there. They had some data, which we don't have in our budget, that I could find, some rationalization for what they were charging. The general fund was charging the utility fund, sanitation fund. And one of the things I really found funny, I've been doing accounting work and messing with numbers for 58 years. So I've seen a lot of funny numbers. This one was really funny. I don't remember the exact amount, but it's a city slightly smaller than the city of Nacogdoches. The general fund was charging the utility funds significantly more than $1 million for using the city streets. Now, if that makes sense to you, are we charging I'm not saying that we are, I'm asking a question. Are we charging the water and sewage operation and the sanitation operation $1.5 million a year to run their vehicles up and down our streets? I hope we're not. I don't know what else to say. Obviously, would be extremely opposed to any further rate increases for the next foreseeable future for water, sewer, and sanitation rates. In fact, what I would do if I were in you guys' position, I would work towards reducing the rates and offsetting some of that interfund transfer with maybe a property tax increase, which is where we're supposed to be getting the general operation revenue, that and sales tax primarily, for the city, not ripping it off of the utility funds. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Not? We'll close the public hearing. Mr. Jeffers?
Be happy to answer any questions, Madam Mayor.
Council?
Well, could you respond to his points?
I'm going to say, as a city manager that has been doing this for over 42 years, that I have never been in a city that so aggressively pursues transfers from the utility funds. I don't know what that historic perspective is. There is nothing that is a violation of law in doing that, but I would argue that that certainly is not a best practice. We have agonized over that. I have for 15 years and have not made any progress in reducing those numbers simply because of how anemic the general fund is. That's not justification for doing that, but it is a reality. What we do is that we do charge a franchise fee from the general fund to the water and sewer fund. The electric company pays in excess of $1 million a year to the general fund in franchise fees. The natural gas, telephone, and cable TV. By the way, over the years, those calculations have become pretty convoluted and controlled by the state. That may be a good thing. I tend to think it is a bad thing. It is the state interfering in local affairs and something that it should be the choice of a city council and not the state legislature. But nonetheless, that is what we have been dealt. What we do is that we do charge the utility fund a franchise fee, just like we charge any other utility that puts poles in our right-of-way or puts lines underneath our right-of-way. That is a common practice of cities, and I would say, or I would argue, it's a best practice. I don't know that I've ever seen an academic piece that would support or refute that. The other item that we do is that we transfer from the utility and the sanitation fund a third and a third for support services. So 2/3 of the city council's budget, a whopping $25,000, $30,000, comes from the utility fund and the sanitation fund, but also the city attorney, the city manager's office, the city secretary, finance, engineering. I'll say legal twice just because I can, and some other support services. Now, if we were to do that correctly, if we had appropriate staff, we would track hours and then make an allocation based on time actually spent. You could argue in many years that the bulk of the engineering department's budget should be charged to the water and sewer fund, and other years not. But I think that that is a best practice, and that is the way that it should be done. But in order to get there, we have to increase revenue and decrease expenses in the general fund. Those council members that have been around a while know that we do the best that we can, always welcome for suggestions as to how we cut or how we manage expenses, including reducing those. When I came, we had a deputy city manager. We defunded the deputy city manager position because of a lack of funding. And we can point throughout the city where those type of changes have been made. And I would argue in most departments, any additional reduction, and we're there already, is we have diminishing returns because you don't seem to be able to get done everything that needs to be done in a timely fashion. As a matter of fact, some things are just put on the back burner and they seem to languish. With that said, I'm extremely proud of our staff. I think that they do much more than anyone else could do under similar circumstance. And I'm confident that they will continue to do what they're doing because they indeed have a servant's heart and they enjoy serving the city. That's the explanation for the transfers. One glaring, what I wouldn't call best practice, is to say that the sanitation fund, because of its small size, has to transfer a third of its money. The same percentage is in the utility fund. And so when you look at the sanitation fund, the interfund transfer dominates the pie chart. That is not a best practice. But once again, that's the hand that we've been dealt. In summary, the best way to address that is to, or probably the only way to address that is to have additional revenues in the general fund. And as you know, that is easier said than done. I know many times we have individuals who stand up and they want to compare what we do versus what other cities do. And those comparisons are valid, but you have to take into consideration all of the facts. For example, the city of Nacogdoches only has 1% sales tax. The city of Lufkin has 1.5%. The city of Lufkin's assessed value is higher than the city of Nacogdoches. And you can run your calculations and you can bring those down to where you are making a comparison, but just looking at raw data, those comparisons aren't particularly valid without breaking down what the differences are. We love to compare what we do to what other communities do. It's a good benchmark and it prompts healthy discussion, and that's important. And I commend Dr. Smith for the work that he has done. He hasn't stood in front of the council and just said, you need to do this, you need to do that. He has done his homework, and he's provided some valid points that I agree with. And Dr. Smith, before you get away, if you'll give this young lady your contact information, I'd like to have the opportunity to visit with you more also. On water and sewer rates, we showed the city council earlier, we do not set water and sewer rates based on what other cities are charging. But we're one of the lowest, according to the Texas Municipal League, as far as water and sewer charges in the region. And we're kind of in the middle of the pack in the state. There's some reassurance with that, but also we've had to make some very difficult decisions. Case in point, and none of you had the pleasure of enjoying this little exercise. I'd been here about 6 months, and I had to stand up in front of the City Council and recommend a 100% increase in sewer rates, because the city had borrowed money, previous administration, you didn't have anything to do with it, and they didn't provide a revenue source to pay the debt service. And so they were using reserves. And once the reserves are gone, you've got to do something. And so needless to say, I was invited to leave this town by some of my fine neighbors, and I understand their frustration, but the bottom line is that the city made a poor decision and wasn't properly servicing the debt. The staff that you see behind me, they didn't have anything to do with that. And staff that we have now, they're on their toes, they're identifying problems, and we are constantly looking for solutions. As far as staffing, anytime there's a vacancy, it has to come through my office before approval is granted. We've reduced staff by, I don't know, we haven't done the numbers in a while, simply because I think that we're to the point that it's difficult to do any more meaningful reductions. But this is a discussion that the council may want to have at some point in time, is what do you want this city to be? What services are important? And the frightening part is are there services that aren't important? And I can assure you that every service that you identified, you're going to find out that they have a vocal constituency that you're going to hear from. That's fine, and that's part of the process. But the bottom line is, if you want these services, then you got to find a way to pay for them. To Mr. Witt's comment, and I mentioned to you earlier that the increase in the fee for street maintenance, it's not a water charge. The water bill is simply a mechanism that the fee is assessed. It is a fee for the general fund dedicated to street maintenance. The reason why the City Council had to make that difficult choice is because we have been avoiding some other difficult choices simply because, okay, we went through the recession and things are going to get better. And things did not get better. So as we did not take care of the general fund the way that you do the enterprise funds, then the general fund really began to slip behind. Two very important components in the general fund that were being overlooked. One is our employees, and that's in all the funds. I think that I can say with confidence that I'll put up our employees against any other city, large or small, in the state for the work that they do. They're extraordinary. We're not perfect, but we have a lot of people that put in an awful lot of hours that are exempt. They don't get paid overtime. And we have some other employees, like in the utility fund, that are out 3 o'clock in the morning repairing a significant water leak, simply because that's what has to be done. But the other indicator were the streets. I think that everybody could agree that the city was not adequately taking care of streets, and that we had to do something. And that's because we had not been increasing taxes and making sure that there were adequate funds. And that's not a criticism, that's just what it was. And we had to do catch up, and we had to do it quickly. And the most expedient way to do that was the imposing of a fee, which I commend the council. I think it was courageous of you to recognize that you had a problem and you didn't just talk about it, you found a way to fix it instead of kicking the can down the road, which happens a lot at the state and federal government. Some people said, well, the $5 is a tax. I don't care what you call it. You can call it a tax, you can call it a fee. It is revenue for the city that is earmarked specifically for taking care of the streets. And it was something that was desperately needed, and you're beginning to see the fruits of that action, particularly this year, but you're going to see it be sustained into the years that come. I think I answered the question that I was asked, and then probably more than I was asked. But when I get close to Jefferson, I just feel the urge to talk. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. That was a lot of good information. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a general one. Familiar with this book? TM's
Yes.
handbook. I just want to read from the budget, and it says, financial management is indeed unglamorous and budgets are poor leisure reading. However, it is also true among all the functions performed by the city council. Budgeting is the most important. It is in its simplest definition, budgeting is a plan for utilizing the city's available funds during a fiscal year to accomplish established goals and objectives. So my question is can you tell us how the city council has been engaged in the preparation of the budget?
This council, or?
How, I mean, what are some specific, I mean, I see the way the budget is done is it's presented to us and we have hearings and then we approve it. There's no real engagement by the city council to determine how, as it says in here, available funds to accomplish established goals and objectives. I mean, it doesn't seem like the city council actually is engaged in the budgeting process, but rather we perform our regulatory requirements of having public hearings and then approving it. So are we engaged and I just don't see it, or are we not engaged?
Council has to make that determination ultimately, but I'll offer my observations. I'll first say they stowed my comment, and that is that you've heard me say that the budget is the single most important document, operational document, that the city council adopts on a regular basis, simply because it determines the level of services that are going to be provided the citizens. If you don't have that, then everything stops. With the council manager form of government, the city charter places the responsibility of preparation of the budget with the city manager. That process will start literally as soon as we're finished with this budget. We'll start all over again. It takes up way too much time, way too many resources, but once again, it's the single most important operational budget that the city council adopts. I've always said that preparation of proposals for the council to consider, including the budget, that's easy. Having the courage to run for elective office, to subject yourself to possible rejection, and to sit in those chairs and then to make the final decision as to policy adoption, that's where the rubber works the road. And the council manager form of government is a team. There are some city charters that even go so far as to say that the city manager is a ex officio member of the city council. I don't know that that is necessary, but I will note that when I got here, the city manager sat right there, and the council kicked me from the podium and put me down here. Actually, that didn't happen that way. I said, I don't want to sit up there, simply because you're the elected officials, not me or any staff member. You're the one who has to make the final decision. You're the one who every 2 years has to stand up in front of the citizens, if you choose to, and say, I would like to be reelected. And then the city electeds, or the citizens, I'll get it right here in a minute, they make that final decision as to whether or not you're going to continue to serve or whether or not they want someone else. And a lot of that is based on the decisions that you have made or not made. That's the tough job. As to how much time a council member spends on city business, there's no prerequisite. Each one of you have a different area of expertise that you are interested in. And Councilmember Moore, since you asked the question, I know that you're very passionate about the environment and you ask great questions there, but I'll also commend you about your curiosity about the budget and the process. I think sometimes when we see an email from Matthew Moore and it has budget on it, some of us, not me, it may be Jefferson, will roll their eyes and say, what now? But that's part of the process for council. You decide what you want. We do have a policy, if one council member asks, we give it to all council members. Because of how voluminous some of the requests that you made, we didn't distribute it. We said, hey, if you want it, we'll make you another copy. And some asked for it and some said, no, thank you. There are some of you who have great financial expertise. You know, Garth is a numbers nerd. You said it, not me. And he does an extraordinary job of looking at a single sheet on the budget and comes up with some great questions. All of you have asked great questions. I think that the budget workshop that the council had recently, it may not have been as robust as some may have expected, but I think it was a starting point for the council to become more engaged in the process. When I got here, we had budget workshops, and the council, the policymakers, they said, we don't need budget workshops. That's the city manager's problem. Well, it's not the city manager's problem. It is our challenge, and we need to work on it together, especially when it gets to council. I wish that we had much more public comment, and I know that many of you do also, to where they would spend some time with the budget, talk about their favorite programs, or even talking about programs that they might not want. So the level of engagement has to be determined by each council member. There's not a requirement from the budget gods. There's not a requirement from the state legislature. Our city charter says, city manager prepared the budget. Oh, by the way, if you don't adopt the budget, then it's adopted automatically, whatever budget that the city manager prepared. I've had some councils who say, if we don't change the budget, then we haven't done our job. I don't agree with that. Part of my job is to understand what you want, what you don't want. I'm talking about the majority. can't take care of everybody, then we try to see that that is reflected in the budget. Unfortunately, because of how tight resources have been, City Council has not been as drawn into the process as what I would like, but where I found that the council becomes most engaged and begins looking at the budget as a whole is that when I stand up and I say, we've got $2 million of discretionary funds, how would you like to spend it? Or do you want to save it? Then the council becomes much more engaged in the process. As tight as the budget has been, it's challenging to find meaningful dialogue about proposed changes. It's just hard, simply because I think that we're providing bare bones essential services. Probably told you more than you wanted to hear again.
Right, so the answer to the question is, we really weren't involved in the budget process at all, other than just here at the very end.
I think that's up for each council member to answer, because,
I'm asking you, do you believe this city council was engaged in the budget? I mean, isn't the individual departments due to you March 31st? Is that right? That's when the individual departments had budgets?
that sounds right, but
Right, and so, and you did mention, well, the budget starts immediately, but I think we got the budget in July, and then we had a workshop after the public hearings had already been set. Not that
Right.
that's a problem, but the point is you know, the cake was made. You know, I mean, could it have been changed? Yes. I mean, legally, yes, but was the process, you know, where, you know, the elected officials were engaged in deciding, as it says in the TML handbook, how the money gets distributed, and, you know, looking at the individual, like the CIP plan and the other issues. I mean, I don't see that I wasn't engaged with it. I don't know if other people were engaged on a kind of a individual one-on-one basis or not, but I didn't see the council being engaged in that process, and I'm asking you to correct me if that's an incorrect assumption.
I don't think it's correct, because like I said, I think everybody was engaged. Jay, being really late in the process, but he asked for some information. Everybody was engaged, where I had individual discussions with council members about the budget and their areas of interest, and what about this and what about that. Is that a level that I would like? No, I'd like to see more. But as far as the cake being made, that's the city manager's responsibility per the charter, is to bake the cake, and then it's up to the council to put the icing on the cake and make whatever changes that they would like, that they feel like that is important in order to provide the services to the citizens.
Okay, well, thank you.
Good questions.
Go right ahead.
I mean, I agree that the budget is a year-round venture. And one of the things, the monthly reports and quarterly reports may not be budget per se, but you can monitor the spending, you can monitor interfund transfers, and when the budget proposals come out, you better understanding of what happened or the things that you want to make a change to. So the budget is not just the 3 or 4 months that we get the budget. The budget is a 12-month venture, in my opinion.
You know, those are some great comments, Mayor Pro Tem Bowden. And actually, you gave me an idea as to how I might collectively punish the city council a little bit more, and you'll be given credit for it. But governmental accounting is different than your business accounting. And those monthly financial reports that we provide, I know that some of you look at them because I get questions now and then. but I think we probably need to stand up to the in front of the council. Ms. Kerbo will get that distinct privilege, and tell you how to read that report, what's important that you should pay particular attention to, and if you think that that will be helpful, then we'll certainly be happy to do that. You know, and later, back to the question about being more involved, I've already given some thought to reworking the timeline. The city charter says that we have to hand you a budget by July. We can get it to you earlier, at least a month. Some cities do it even more so than that. But the numbers could change, but that's okay. The numbers change. But that way it will give you the opportunity to look at the budget before we're in the hearing stage, if that's what the council wants. And we'll come back later with a proposed timeline to see if you're interested in doing something different. We're going to talk about council format, work sessions, and if we can institutionalize budget work sessions or presentations to council that interest the council. I don't want something that interests staff. I want something that interests the council. So you're going to need to decide that, and then we can go from there. Sometimes when I stand up in front of you and I'm talking about the total funding for the police department, after I've talked for 30 minutes before, I don't know that the information is that meaningful at that point to you. So let's have some thought, and we can discuss it later, about what makes your row in the budget more meaningful to you. And one of the things that I heard, not putting words in your mouth, is that you would like to see the budget before the mandatory July date.
I think what I said is I'd like to see the council be engaged in the preparation of the budget. Let me, if I may, tell a quick little story. There's didn't see this happen, but a management consultant had a glass jar she had setting up on the podium, and she reached in underneath and put in a bunch of big rocks and says, how many people think it's full? You know, about 50% of the people said it looks full to us, and then she reaches in, puts some gravel in there, shakes it in. You know, now how many thinks it's full? You know, a few more people. Then she puts some sand in, smooths it off. How many now think it's full? And, you know, 90% say it looks, 95% say it's full, and then she reaches and pours some water in that fills it all the way up to the top, and asks what's the moral of this story. Most people answer that question, there's always some more room to put stuff in. The real moral to that story is if you don't put the big stuff in first, you'll never get it in. And so if we don't sit around and decide what are the important things, you know, beyond what we have to fund, the police, the fire, you know, public works, then we're never going to get those big pieces in there. And that's not going to happen if we wait till, you know, the budget is completely done and we aren't looking at it ahead of time so that we can say, you know, maybe we look at redoing the main theater. You know, could that have worked? Or there's lots of opportunities out there that we can spend a little bit of money here and there, or maybe more than a little bit of money here and there to, in a long-term plan, make Nacogdoches, or continue to make Nacogdoches a really special place. We could have bought that lot for $3,400 and begin to improve our floodplains. That would have just been a small, insignificant, I mean, it would have been a nothing decision. But that's a gone. You know, I mean, I've asked that we talked about floodplain management. We've had floodplain management presentation. There was a perfect opportunity to take actual action and do something that would have cost almost nothing, but it's just gone. And who knows what will happen with that lot now. Somebody didn't buy that lot so they could have an old vacant house sitting there. I'm pretty sure of that. You know, that's not, I mean, that would be a really bad financial decision to just spend $3,400 on a piece of property that's just junk. You know, I mean, I don't know, maybe they're gonna hold it and then sell it to the city for, you know, $6,800. I don't know what the long-term plan is, but either they're really stupid or they've got some plan that doesn't involve preserving the floodplain there. And so we are not, I don't think, you know, looking and trying to, and I don't mean to be critical. I mean, I love our staff. I mean, I've worked with Pam, and I hope that I haven't asked for too much voluminous information from you. I've been very specific in some of these reports like this, or, you know, just print out and send a PDF. It's not too demanding, but there are a lot of cool projects that we could begin looking at, but that's not going to happen if the council doesn't sit down early in the process and begin to, you know, brainstorm on what they could be, work our way through how much it would cost to do it, and then figure out what we can and can't do. I mean, people are going to be a lot more interested in paying higher taxes and water if they see a really great project. Daniel Burnham, who was the architect for the 1898 or 1900 World's Fair, said, make no small plans because they don't inspire anybody. And you know, it's like, I don't know what we're going to do here. I mean, I don't know what we're doing. I mean, we're spending $63 million. Isn't that what we're spending? You know, that's a lot of money, $63 million. And our job up here is the board of directors of a corporation that has a $63 million budget. And sure, we've got to pay everybody. I mean, I can't agree more that we've got a fantastic staff. But it is time that we start getting engaged in this process early on and see if the way we can find 1% of the budget to do something that's different than, you know, keeping the trains running on time, so to speak. Anyway, I just wanted to get that off my chest while I had a chance.
No, and I think that those are great comments, and I would, not putting words in any council members, but I would say that most of the council is going to say, yeah, we'd like to dream and talk about some of these game-changing projects for the community. So there's, that's welcome. And like I said, we're going to talk about this city council meeting format, which may or may not help us to get to where you've suggested that we go. But those discussions about what you would like to see in future budgets, even though we're working on adopting the budget, and certainly make changes now, are not difficult. All you got to do is vote. But now's the time to begin talking about what do you want to be considered in the future, and then the council needs to speak in a chorus and say, yes, this is a priority. Now go forth and make it work.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Pam, thank you for all your hard work. I mean, you do a great job, and you do a super well done budget. It's fantastic, actually.
Not to blow her cover, but all she does is push a button and it prints it out.
That's all any of us do, is push buttons anymore, right?
It's a big book, I guess so. Okay, council, any other questions? Then we will move, thank you, Mr. Jeffers. We will move along to agenda item number 8, consider bid award for 2018 street paving project. Mr. Opperman.
Mayor, City Council, Case Opperman, Assistant City Engineer. Come to you this evening asking you to consider award for the 2018 street paving project to Drury Construction. On August 22nd, we received 3 bids for that work, with Drury being the lowest at $419,984. Drury is well known around here. They're already doing the 2018 crack seal and seal coat projects this summer, and those are well underway and doing a great job on those. This project will be a more extensive repair scheme for 4 of our residential streets: North Sanders, Maid Marion, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and Ritchie Street. The additive alternate bid items for this project also included milling of a separate segment of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard that our city staff can then go back and repave in-house, and also manhole and water valve adjustments that will save our staff time and manpower that's honestly not available at this time. So the additive alternate bid total was $39,112, and we recommend awarding both of those bids at this time. Would note that the street maintenance fee is being utilized exclusively for this project. So you can see the number there, $475,000 is what we've accrued to this date, and $459,096 is what we're asking for to do all of this work. So street maintenance fee being put to good use, and it's completely funding this project. So we would recommend award of both of these. After public comment, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this? Okay. Closing public comment. Council, any questions?
Got one.
Yes.
Could you speak to the difference between the crack seal and the repaving, both in function? Like how good does the crack seal do?
Sure.
Mr. Witt talked about it being pretty ugly. Is
Yes,
it
sir.
serving a very excellent functional purpose, and it's 1/10 of the cost of repaving, or what are we looking at there?
It's a fraction of the cost, yes, sir. And I would just note that the 2018 crack seal project is preceding the 2018 seal coat. So all those black lines that are getting put down right now are very soon going to be covered up with rock and asphalt surface. So we won't have to look at those lines for too long. And the purpose of the crack seal is to keep moisture out. It keeps rainwater out of the cracks that further deteriorates the asphalt. It's a good way to save our mediocre streets from further deterioration where they become much more expensive repairs that you can see here. These 4 streets in particular, 2 of them are patch and overlay streets. One is a pulver mix, which is basically chewing the whole thing up and putting it back in and then overlaying it. And then milling on Martin Luther King Jr. is basically taking off the surface and then laying in new asphalt. You can see the totals there, an average of $100,000 per street. Obviously, the just patch and overlays are not as expensive, but you can see the difference in just the cost per square yard. It's a fraction when you're doing seal coat and crack seal. So crack seal and seal coat is what we try and do on the ones that we can save at this time that have maybe just dead asphalt, the brown pavement that you see around. It helps us to get a little more life out of those streets before we have to come back in and do this extensive work. So we hope to get maybe 10 to 15 years out of that street when we seal it up. And then obviously when we redo it, we get hopefully 15 to 20 years again. But pushing it down the road 10 to 15 years is a pretty good investment for a fraction of the cost. So,
Thank you. I appreciate
yes, sir.
that.
Yes, sir.
One question, I don't know, it's page 74 or 76, but additive alternate bid
Yes, sir.
on MLK,
Yes, sir.
and it states it's from East Bridge to Railroad.
Yes, sir. And I was counting on the map to help me out there. It's kind of hard to describe. It's the segment in front of the softball field.
Okay.
You have the
Okay.
2 bridges, and then you have your railroad on the east side by Pilgrim's Pride. City crews actually did between the 2 bridges last summer. And so what that actually proved to us was that MLK at that width of 50 foot or so is much too large for us to do in-house, because we were hauling off just tons of material by shovel. And so asking the contractor to just go ahead and mill that up while they're
Okay.
already milling up the other side of MLK, we hoped would be a good solution, and they gave us a good price for that. But MLK between the East Bridge, which is just past the softball field, and then the railroad before you get to Pilgrims.
Okay, what about the rest of MLK from the East Bridge towards Fredonia? Yes, Fredonia. Is any work gonna be done on that section?
I know we've talked about doing it in the past. We do need to do something about it. It's also in bad shape too.
Really,
A lot of 18-wheeler traffic there that kind of makes it rough. So that is definitely on our radar. Yes, sir.
I'm good.
Okay. Yes.
Going back to Mr. Witt's, one of Mr. Witt's comments earlier, is there a mechanism in place, and also knowing that everyone in the engineering department has nothing but free time every day?
Of course.
Is there any sort of mechanism in place for quality control as these things are done? As he mentioned, there were some of the crack fills that did not appear to be fully done, properly done, that sort of thing.
We only crack seal, and what it is in this project, you can do it one of two ways. You can either blow and seal it with a high pressure blower, or you can route it out like we're doing in this one. And so our metric for that is anything over 1/8 of an inch. So there's a lot of kind of hairline cracks that aren't quite that wide. And what we plan for that is for it to just be covered up. It gets sealed in with the asphalt that gets sprayed down before they put the rock. So the smaller cracks, it'll get filled in with that asphalt.
Okay.
So
I guess what I was more curious about was whether or not there is a mechanism for either engineering or street maintenance staff to check on the contractors as they're doing this work to make sure that it's all coming up to the standard that we're expecting and paying for.
Yes, sir. And I can say I personally go out every day almost and check on these guys. Most mornings is what I do on my way in. And so I'll catch them out there and talk to them a little bit about, what's going on, what they're doing. If I see an area that I think they missed with their paint marks to route out, I'll address that. These are professional contractors, so most of the time there's not that issue, but we have caught a couple of areas where they just needed to paint another line, and and they're more than happy to do that. So we do try our best to keep a close eye on them. So, and we've had good success so far.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Hearing none, Chair would entertain a motion for approval of the bid award.
So moved.
I second that.
Moved and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Offerman. Number 9, consider ratifying prior approval of engineering services for electrical lighting and power distribution at the Nacogdoches Baseball Complex. Good evening, Mr. Bray.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Brian Bray, your Director of Community Services. This is somewhat of an unusually worded item. I think it's the first one I've seen. And in short, it is asking for approval of a contract for some work that's already been done and some work that is hopefully going to be done in the very near future. A little bit on the background. In the spring of 2017, the city, had already engaged with 215 Consulting for a light pole study. I had attended a catastrophic failure of light standards presentation at a conference and was somewhat shocked when I realized that we had not had an inspection of our light poles, which this was several years ago. It's bringing us up to the future. And so Calvin White with 215 Consulting was wrapping up that study in the spring, right at the same time that we had this power failure at our baseball complex. We actually didn't have the power failure. We discovered some highly unsafe conditions, and so it was a recommendation of staff to cut the power to the individual fields. At that time, we went ahead and engaged with 215 Consulting. They were obviously very familiar with the property. They were completing a light pole study. Had excellent reputation. We had a general services agreement in place. I had found it to be very easy to work with them. And there were several departments moving around in this because it was such an unusual scenario where we had, fences that were possibly electrified. That's not something that I'm very familiar with, and so I was working with other departments, and we overlooked it. We overlooked the problem of getting a contract in place, and ultimately that's my fault. That's the reason we were moving forward without a contract is I failed to ensure that we had one. 215 Consulting was moving forward with drawing up plans to do power distribution within the complex, and we were hit with another blow. And that other blow was from the meter where Encore service stops coming into the complex. We had a power failure there, which meant there was zero electricity. Even though we turned most of it off, we no longer had the ability to energize anything because that part failed. 215 switched gears. Phase 1 became the main power supply from Encore coming into our complex. That was part of the work that's already been done. That work was bid out, contract was awarded, it has been completed, and that was done earlier in 2018. When we were working on Phase 2, the bid document preparation, is when I realized that we did not have a contract in place. With the help of Mr. Davis and Mr. Jeffers, we sort of expedited the review process to get this before you this evening. We worked as quickly as we could. Obviously, Mr. Davis has a few other things to do, so I couldn't be at the top of his list every day, but it was pretty darn close. So Phase 2 is actually also on the next agenda item. Phase 2 was bid replacing direct buried cable within the complex, replacement of wooden poles at 4 of the baseball fields, repair work to a light that's in the parking lot at the baseball complex, replacing of 3 poles at the adult softball complex, along with some alternate bids for replacing metal poles at the other 3 fields. So baseball complex today has metal poles and wooden poles. And then Phase 3, the part that has not been done yet, and the proposed contract we have for 215 Consulting to be completed, the design work anyway, can be completed by November 30th, were some minor repairs to Bonita Creek Park and Maroney Park, replacing of light poles at the Recreation Center and Library, and replacing of 4 wooden poles at the Clint Dempsey Soccer Complex. The total contract amount with 215 Consulting for all 3 of these phases is $87,210.25. So Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have after public comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this? Okay, hearing none. Public comment is closed. Council, questions or comments? Okay.
Once we get through with this, is it gonna be like all the lights? I'm thinking mainly about the fields out there on the loop. Are all the lights gonna be brand new circuit breakers, brand new conduit, brand new wiring, brand new poles? Is it all gonna be brand new?
Depending on the award of the contract on the next phase.
Yeah.
Yes, it could. Yes, it can be. There are alternate bids, and so if the alternate bids are not approved, then the majority of it will be all brand new. If the alternates are, it will be brand new. Hopefully that kind of
So
answers
it will
the
be,
question.
so all of the electricity out at the ball fields will be brand new poles, all metal poles.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And do metal poles, I mean, what's their lifespan? I mean, didn't I read somewhere that you're replacing some metal poles?
Yes, and I'll answer part of that, and then if it's okay with you, I'll defer to the consultant to answer the lifespan of the new metal poles. The reason why we are proposing or have as an alternate bid to replace some of the metal poles is a lot of the work that was done was by well-intended individuals who may have been doing work outside of their expertise. And so, the poles are still strong today, but they weren't engineered. They weren't designed to be where they are today. And so that's why we have it on there to replace some of the metal poles. The wooden poles, they've reached well beyond their life expectancy. The report showed that I believe Encore has a 30 to 40 year lifespan on their poles. Most of these poles were used when they were installed in the 1970s. And so that's the reason why we have the wooden pole replacements. But from the meter all the way into the main hub, and I'm not an engineer or electrician, so I apologize for using the simple terms because I don't know the correct ones. But to the hub, and then from that hub to each individual pole, scoreboard, electrical outlets will all be brand new.
And it will be in conduit under,
Yes, sir.
buried like 3 feet deep or 2 feet deep or whatever.
Once again, I don't know the exact depth, but yes, it will be. Most of it is going to be bored because we do not want to have trenches running across the baseball fields.
Okay, and once that is done, and this is some general questions about the ballparks. What other things would need to be done to have those ballparks in quote-unquote perfect condition? I mean, is there any irrigation that needs to be done? Is there parking that needs to be done? Is there fencing that needs to be done? you know, what else is coming down the path before those fields are 100% done, so we can get on with our sports tourism plan?
That's an awful lot to answer, and I'll probably have to do some more research and be
Okay.
able to get back with you to answer that one.
But
I
there
can-
is some more stuff that there's gonna be more money to fix those fields up.
There are always improvements that can be made. The president of the Baseball Association, Mr. Williams, is here, and so he can probably speak to that a little bit more directly. But the feedback that we get from people who come here is that we have phenomenal complex, that the fields themselves are some of the best in all of East Texas. So in terms of irrigation and fertilizing, we're there. We
Okay.
have it. We never have enough parking. That's because they're popular, there's not enough parking. I mean, that's a good problem to have. But
I
we also
agree.
have SFA, baseball, softball, and adult softball. And so when we have that perfect storm of an SFA softball game, SFA baseball game, youth baseball game, and an adult softball game, we're spilling out into every direction. There will be minor repairs to backstops and netting that need to be replaced and covers over batting cages. And so those are the kinds of things that I would prefer to spend a little bit of time and go through a checklist, and then I can email that back out
Okay,
to you.
that'd be fine, thanks.
But nothing is planned in terms of, you know, in next year's budget, we would like to do this, in the following year this.
So,
Okay. Anything else?
Nothing beyond the lighting project at this point,
That is correct.
or lighting
And-
slash electrical.
And Mayor, if it's okay, if Mr. Calvin White could answer the question about the life expectancy of the
Sure.
poles.
Hi, Mr. White. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. Calvin White, 215 Consulting. The expected, the typical life expectancy of the metal poles is 30 to 35 years. The warranty period typically for those is 25 years. So the typical standard warranty for those is 25, but stated life expectancy is 30 to 35.
when they fail, how do they fail? I mean, 35 years for a piece of metal seems short.
Most of the time, failure is at crossarm, depending on how the crossarm is mounted to the pole, 70 feet in the air. Same primary concern for a wooden pole, depending on wildlife damage up there in that area, because that's typically where the wildlife damage will occur. So again, later down the road, I mean, these same pole inspections will be a requirement to check the existing conditions at that time to see if any upkeep,
it's-
replacements.
Will you get up there and look for corrosion and then, grind it off and repaint it to preserve it?
That's certainly a possibility, yes, sir. Me personally, I probably not. I don't know my E&O insurance would cover that, but
Where's the name 215 Consulting come from?
it's actually my business partner who's here as well. 2 Timothy 2:15.
It's what? Oh, okay.
2 Timothy 2:15.
Okay. And we have some more questions. This is only issue number 9. We'll do number 10 in a little while, right? Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, no other questions. Chair would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve agenda item number 9.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded that we approve agenda item number 9 is presented. If there's no more discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. And agenda item number 10, consider the contract award for the power distribution and sports lighting improvements.
Yes, Mayor, Council, Brian Bray again, your Director of Community Services. Sorry, I have the wrong folder out in front of me, excuse me. This is mainly what we just discussed as far as the work for Phase 2, primarily at the baseball complex. There were 6 contractors / suppliers that directly received the bid packet. Mr. White also submitted the plans to 4 different individual plan rooms. Unfortunately, on August 2nd, only 2 bidders submitted sealed bids. That would be Ludco and White, and the reason I say unfortunately is we always like to have as many bidders submit as possible so that we can make sure we get the best deal. The bid was the base bid was for replacing the direct buried cable to each field, replacement of wooden poles and lights at 4 fields, repairs to a light pole at the parking lot, 3 poles at the adult softball fields, and then alternate bids to replace metal poles at 3 fields. The base bid for power distribution and replacing of the 4 fields, the low bidder was White Electric with a bid of $669,771. They were also the low on the alternate bids for the metal halide for Farm Field A and B and the Kendrick Field. And I'll kind of stop there and explain the bid tabulation sheet was awfully long and it looked a little confusing, and I was confused myself because you have A2A and A2B and 32C, and because we understand that LED is where the majority of lighting is going. There are many benefits to it, but there's also a much higher cost today than such as the metal halide. So we requested for each of these fields, so for Farm Field A and B, we requested a bid for metal halide and a bid for LED. We also requested that they provide a return on investment for that LED lighting system. The results showed that 20 to 25 years was what it was going to take to get that return on investment. And so staff does not recommend going with the LED light fixtures at our youth baseball complex. At some point in the future, that return on investment will be worthwhile, and we'll have to get there at some point down the line. A little bit of the confusing part on the budgeting side is there are 2 budgeted items that we're referring to in awarding one contract. So we have the power distribution, which is a $1.5 million pot. And then we have the light pole replacement, which is a $397,000 pot. So you combine those two, and there's roughly $1.9 million. What we are recommending this evening is to award the base bid along with metal halide for Farm Field A and B and Kendrick. That combined award would be $756,626. The overall budget for that is that approximate 1.9 or $1.897 million. There are still a couple of other small items that need to come out of that. The positive here is that we had estimated that the power distribution part would take $1.5 million to do, and it actually is less than $400,000 to do. Of course, there's also the consulting fees on the contract you just awarded. There are a few other fees in there, but there will be several $100,000 left over when this project is said and done. So Mayor, staff's recommendation is the base bid to White Electric along with metal halide for Farm Field A and B and Kendrick. And I'd be happy to answer any questions after public comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Jay Williams, my name. My name is Jay Williams. I'm the president of the Nacogdoches Boys Youth Baseball Association. I appreciate you letting me take a few moments to address the council tonight. On behalf of the board of directors of the Baseball Association and the hundreds of kids and families from in and around Nacogdoches who participate in our baseball league each year, I would like to encourage the members of the council and the city to continue funding this project to upgrade the lights and the electrical system at the baseball complex. We know that this is not an easy nor an inexpensive project that the city has undertaken, but it is an important one to a lot of people in our community. Our baseball association has always had a great working relationship with the city. I want to compliment Brian Bray and his staff at Parks and Recreation for their hard work and commitment, not just to us at baseball, but to the youth softball and soccer associations and other programs as well. We know that the city invests a tremendous amount of time and resources to our youth sports programs. I grew up playing in City League baseball and soccer programs. I'm sure that some of you folks did as well. I've now been involved in the Baseball Association here in Nacogdoches for 10 years, and I coached over in the Softball Association for a few years as well. I absolutely believe that youth sports is a big part of the fabric of any community. The past couple of years have been a challenge, there's no doubt, to us in order to pull together our regular spring baseball league without being able to play under the lights. Fortunately, Mother Nature cooperated for the most part each of these past 2 springs, and we were able to schedule and play a full season's worth of games so that all of the kids and families who participated were able to get their full money's worth for a season. However, we are all looking forward to the ability to flip a switch, for lack of a better word, sometime next spring be able to get back to our normal days of operation for our baseball days, including night baseball out at the complex. So again, on behalf of not just our baseball association, but everyone in the community who is able to utilize the great resources that we have at the ballpark. And I could not agree with Brian more. We get tremendous feedback from people that come to Nacogdoches to play baseball about the quality of our facilities. So again, I commend the city and staff for the upkeep of our facilities. It's always, we enjoy getting compliments on the quality of our facilities. Anyway, thanks again. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Mayor, Councilman, I think this is wonderful and needs to be done. I keep coming back to sort of an overall arching question with so many of these things, though, that is this part of a master plan? Do we have a master plan for where we're going with these places so that we don't 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now find that, oh, if we just put these power poles 6 feet over this way, we'd be in good shape for this thing that we want to move towards in the future. And so I would hope that the city would engage in master planning for these facilities so that you know where you're headed and what's happening, and not just deal with things on an ad hoc basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Okay. Council?
I would just like to make a comment.
Yes.
About the LED lights, because our church, we completely removed all the fluorescent lights, et cetera, and installed LEDs inside and outside and security lights. And that was last year. Now we are thinking about time is to replace those, because they gave us a 26-year guarantee. We'll just be breaking even, maybe. And I was surprised at that. Well, mainly because church-wise, we use the inside lights Tuesday and Wednesday night and then Sunday morning. So we're not spending a lot of juice electric to do that recovery. You know, if it was all day, 8 hours a day or whatever, 5 days a week, we'd recover much sooner. But the usage going to push that recovery way out. But I was surprised it took that long.
And that's actually the reason why the return on investment is so long for these, is because of the number of hours. I was surprised when we calculated the number of hours per year that the lights were on. I was surprised that it was as low as it was. So a security light at Walmart in the parking lot, yes, it makes sense. It's on every day. The lights at the baseball field are not, much like your church.
Mr. Henderson?
It's my understanding that there is a recreation master plan.
Yes, sir, there
At
is.
least a relatively short-term one. I'm just curious whether, I know when that master plan was done, there hadn't been those problems at the baseball fields, but does this still kind of fall in line with what you're hoping to do with the master plan?
It does not contradict anything in the Parks Master Plan.
Okay.
The Parks Master Plan calls for revamping of the adult softball fields and turning those over to the Youth Baseball Association. The vast majority of this work does not involve those adult softball fields, except the replacement of 3 poles, which are damaged and have to be replaced.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
I guess I get it, just a couple. I mean, there's a fairly big difference between the 2 bids. Is there any explanation for that?
I do not have one, no, sir.
Okay. And performance bond is required during this process?
Yes.
And who will be the inspector on all the work?
That will be 215 Consulting and staff.
Okay. And it's, when you did the calculations on the LED bulbs, I mean, that's maybe something 215 needs to go into, but could you explain that a little bit more? Because the thing is if we save a lot of electricity, there are, climate change associated conditions associated with that. I mean, if it's strictly a money calculation and it comes out close, then maybe we should look at it, from a different perspective. Do we know, like, the total watt hours that are going to be used and how that all works out? Can we look at that at a little more detail? I mean, can that be answered?
That is well above my level, so
Well,
I'm glad.
it is an engineering question. I mean, can you just basically explain how you did your, I guess what you called it, a cost benefit, no, what'd you call it, a
Return
on investment?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. The return on investment calculation is based on the effective utility rate at the baseball complex, as well as the number of hours that we estimated. We being Brian, Bray, and myself, and Mr. Williams that just spoke. A conservative estimate was 220 hours per field per year, and then at 0.077 cents per kilowatt hour, that's where the return on investment comes from.
And
burning the fields that many hours, there's just not enough time to recoup the dollar amount investment that we're seeing there.
Let me put this, what's the difference in consumption for one field for 1 year, and just electricity, regardless of the money? I mean, does that LED use half as much electricity, a third, a tenth, three-quarters?
It's just above half. It's about 55%.
So we're saying we'll use twice as much electricity, but we'll save more money overall, is what we're saying.
Yes, sir. Like Brian referenced earlier, it would be 20 years monetarily before we got back to even. If we take not all alternates, if we take the base with contingencies plus alternate one, which took the 4 base fields to LED, and then we took the alternate 2B and alternate 3B, which took Kendrick and farm fields to LED as well. So the additional $108,000 there, roughly, it's with the number of hours estimated at the effective utility rate, it's going to take us that 20 to 25 years just to get that $108,000 back in LED savings.
So we break even at 20 years or 25 years,
Yes,
and
sir.
then after that, we'd be saving money.
Yes, sir.
Do we know how often, did you calculate in how often you need to change one type of bulb versus the other type
No,
of
so
bulb?
this is straight electric usage,
And so
it
do we
just gets
know-
worse and further and further.
Do we know if one bulb lasts a lot longer than another bulb?
The LED is proposed to last. Again, the max warranty that we would get on that anyways would be 25 years. So we would warranty it basically to the break-even point.
And what about is it metal halide? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
what it, and what's the time on that?
The lamp life, the metal halide is 8,000 hours. Basically, the lamp life of LED is 50,000 hours.
So
stated.
8,000 hours is a long time.
Yes, sir.
At 220 per, yeah,
Yes,
okay. So we'll never have to replace either one of the bulbs.
I will not commit to that.
That's what, but basically, it sounds like
That's
that.
what we were hoping for, but yes, I mean, we do have outages, and we do have, in the warranty periods that we do have stipulated in the plans, we do have requirements for replacing those outages at the beginning of spring and the beginning of fall season as well.
All right.
Yes, sir.
We've already replaced some LEDs at church.
Yes, sir. And the one thing I would like to comment to that, the sports lighting LEDs are even much more different than the interior lighting LEDs, mainly because of the distance we have to get a lot of light down to the playing surface.
Yeah.
And so we're burning those LEDs, the diodes, at a much higher current, which basically all that means is that we run the risk of burning those out faster. And there's a whole lot of heat introduced there, so they have to dissipate that heat. So there is a risk associated with this supposed 50,000 hour light fixture burning out too soon.
Yeah, I mean, there was a different fixture and wattage type of whatever.
Yes, sir.
Between the inside church and the parking lot and
Yes,
the
sir.
security light.
Thank agenda item number 10 suffice as it's written for a motion for approval?
Yes, Mayor, with the addition of alternate bid phrasing. Is that correct, Mr. Davis?
Yes, as long as we make sure that we've got the alternate, the specific ones, and somebody, if they were so inclined, could add the award of White Electric to that.
So, Mayor, those alternate bid numbers for the metal halide would be alternate A2A and alternate A3A, and that would give the metal halide for Kendrick Field and Farm Field A and B, along with the base bid.
Okay. So, Chair will entertain a motion. If someone is brave enough to try to
I'll take a stab at
spit
it.
that out.
I make a motion, we approve agenda item number 10 with alternate bids A2A and A3A to White Electric.
Perfect.
Second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. If no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Item number 11, consider alternative city council meeting formats. Mr. Jeffers.
Madam Mayor and City Council, apologize for not being at the last meeting. I was engaged in an electrifying process and was still under the influence. But nonetheless, this is what City Council does today. You meet the first and third Tuesday. The agenda is distributed by the preceding Thursday. Reasonable go, I think we can distribute it by Tuesday. If the council wants to push that out, then typically that ends up slowing items getting on the agenda, but we'll do whatever council asks. Agenda packets are posted online. We have an open forum. We have a consent agenda, which we can use more aggressively or less aggressively. Of course, you allow public comment, and then meetings are broadcast as well as many times put on social media. Some alternative formats. And this is not all inclusive. There are other alternatives that council may want to put on the table. Work session for the city council meeting. Some have a work session just prior to a city council meeting for 30 minutes or an hour. Those meetings are open to the public. Anybody may attend. The media typically attends, but it gives the council to discuss complex agenda items in a more informal environment. Also, it's not unusual for some city councils, particularly in larger cities, to have a work session prior to the council, but say a week before, so that they're not hurried in making a decision. Then there's the special work sessions by the city charter that can be at the call of the mayor or by 3 council members. It can be on a very broad topic, as long as we make the city attorney happy, which is difficult, or it can be on a very specific topic. You had a budget workshop recently on the budget. Some cities schedule work sessions on a regular basis, topics to be determined once a quarter, once a month, and some councils, they give up a council meeting, whether you meet twice a month, 4 times a month, and they have a more informal work session environment to discuss issues. City council meeting format. These are items that other cities do. Some cities, call for an agenda items. They do that at the end of a council meeting where the council votes as to what items would actually be on the next agenda. We have not adopted Robert's Rules of Order, and I don't think anybody will recommend that we adopt Robert's Rules of Order. We have a very informal elements of Robert Rules of Order that are within the council relations policy. And those can become more complex if the council wishes, or they can become less complex. A lot of times what the council does is they refer to Robert's Rules of Order. Well, if we were under Robert's Rules of Order, this is what we would have to do. And it's up to the council to decide what to do and how to do it. You can change start times. You can make it later. You can make it earlier. Many councils have lunch meetings, and what they're doing is they're being sensitive to council members' time. All these meetings are open to the public. Some councils meet a half a day or all day, and then they do the public business later in the evening where the public can attend. And so you're addressing items when you do that. In essence, you're having a work session through most of the day talking about future issues before they are ever on the agenda for a vote. And I know that some have expressed, gee, wouldn't it be nice for us to have the opportunity to discuss these items without being backed up against a deadline for a vote. The agenda format can change. Some cities have multiple readings of ordinances before they are adopted. Some 2, some 3. Some would argue that that affords the public greater opportunity to participate. It's not unusual when the council considers adoption of the ordinance, the Daily Sentinel publishes it, and then some citizens, oh, I have a concern about that. Well, it's too late. But many times a newspaper article will prompt interest, and then it said, well, no, it's not too late. You have the opportunity to come to the second reading. I know some have observed that governance is painfully slow, and this would make it more painful, but greater transparency. The intent of this is for the city council to say, hey, we would like to consider a different format. If you say you want to keep things as they are, then this is a very brief item on the agenda. But if you want to discuss making changes, what I would like, Madam Mayor, is the council have the discussion, and then if there is an agreement, then ask staff to develop proposed policies to bring back to council for consideration at a future time. Madam Mayor, I'll be happy to answer any questions before I step out of the conversation after there is public comment.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this? Yes, Brandy.
My name is Brandy Cartwright, and I don't have a specific opinion about what format you should use, but I did want to tell you that I have appreciated more discussion that's happening at the city council meetings right now. I've been coming to city council meetings for the last 4 years, and I do have to say that this last year has been a lot more. I feel like I know what the issues are more because there's more questions being asked to staff members during the city council meeting, and that's really helpful because there's been lots of times in the past that, you know, everybody voted on something. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And so I do appreciate the discussion that has happened, and I hope that any format you do consider keeps that going.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilman. I really like the idea of 2 readings so that word gets out that this is about to happen. I also think it would be wonderful if you held a work session a week prior to the meetings that would allow some additional discussion of what might be coming up at the next meeting. And I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, close that public comment period. And questions or clarifications for Mr. Jeffers? I think it would be great for us to discuss the things maybe we like or don't like, or maybe even think about it and talk to him separately and come back and visit about it again. Because I know some of this is new for some of you. So, but did you have something you wanted to say? Okay.
I really don't have any issue with any of the topics, the city council meeting format, but I do have preferences. And I really would like to see, prior to the council meeting, work sessions. I know you 2 options, same day or week. I definitely like to see the same day. And the special work session by the mayor, I think would be very good. I'm open, but there are some preferences on there. And I do like the idea about being able to go back and clarify some of the discussion with the city manager by each individual city council members, and then bring that to the council.
Okay. You have any comments?
I'm in agreement. I'd love to see
What
some
is it?
proposed alternatives. We can touch on those.
Okay.
I think we definitely need to change things, and this idea of meeting one-on-one with you, what if we, and Mr. Davis, you might have to comment on this, if we wrote in other words, we conveyed some of these ideas, in writing. Like, I have these ideas, and then, those became a series of talking points to use in a further discussion, because there's no hurry to change this. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. Let's make sure that we're all in consensus about how it's done, and that the important the problems that we see are actually going to be solved by the actions that are taken in changing the meeting. So I would rather, have the time to, draft, if you will, for lack of a better word, a memo. These are some of my ideas. These are some of the things I'm thinking about. Send it to you. Everybody, we have a deadline when we send them to you, and that could be like definitely after the budget, maybe sometime in October. And then, you distribute those out to everybody, and then we look at what everybody else is thinking, and then work on a way to come up with a consensus idea. I think it's more, I like it better that way, where we do put something down in writing on what we're thinking.
Do you think it would make a good topic for a special work session?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I would agree.
Okay.
And I think the preparation should be, writing
What you mentioned.
some of your ideas, just lay some of those, and it's a lot of it's done. You could probably just go through here and I like this one, or that one, or what about this, or this solves this particular problem. I know we've talked about Robert's Rules of Order, and, you mentioned there's a big book. There's also a book about that big. And the Robert's Rules are, I'm not saying let's do Robert's Rules of Order. I'm just saying they're not nearly as complicated as they've been made out to be. And I'm not even suggesting, I'm just using that as an example. So I'd like to see us find a way to have more discussion. The idea of putting items off. I could even see an agenda item that automatically doesn't get passed until the next meeting without a specific vote to pass at this meeting. So the default is to talk about, because I don't know about y'all, but I certainly have questions. I'll walk out of here and I'll go to sleep or laying there in bed. I go, I should have asked about this. I should have thought about that, because it's a lot, try to think of all the important issues while you're up here, and that's hard to do. It's hard for me to do. Maybe y'all can do it great. But I would like the idea that you can come back later on and talk about those. And those are the kind of issues I'd like to flush out if we're going to go through the trouble of changing this meeting formats.
Okay. Is that direction clear?
Help me, Counselor, fine with everyone sending me a memo, but I don't think that I can distribute those thoughts until we get into the work session. So that would create an open, or rather a walking quorum. Nat, you don't need to get up. You sit now, that's okay.
I've been sitting a long time.
I know.
But we could even write
Yeah,
how what we want
Yeah.
down, and then we could discuss it I mean, you'd be prepared to discuss it. You have another,
No, ma'am, you could do that, either bring those to, actually have a work session on this topic.
right.
And we could post it properly and set that forth to satisfy the Open Meetings Act. Or you could put it in writing and submit it to Mr. Jeffers. You just couldn't have that
He can't then
exchange.
distribute,
That's
yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
But you could have an open discussion of it at the work session that would be posted in an agenda form for the public to attend.
Could
It'll
he?
give Mr. Jeffers at least some notion of the direction each of us might like to go in the work session.
I think the most significant item, if we have it in advance, then we can do the PowerPoint so that everybody can see. Hopefully there will be some commonality.
Yes.
And so we can group those items, and those items that are outliers, then here they are, still worthy of discussion. But I think that's the big thing. If we get it in advance, it will save you a little bit of time when you go before, or when you go into the work session.
So what I hear you saying is we could send you information, you could summarize that into your own document, and that document could be sent out as an agenda for a meeting or a workshop. Is that what you're saying?
The actual comments, no, could not be distributed, but the work session would be council meeting format.
Okay.
It'd be very broad. But then in the meeting, then we can share the results of what individual council members said. And if any of you ask me what somebody else said, the answer is no, so don't do that.
Okay,
Well,
any
you
final
do it.
comments?
And we ought to put that off at least, well into after the budget, I mean, there's no, are you okay with that?
No, yeah.
Yeah, and what we'll do, I'll sit down with the mayor, we'll pick some dates, let everybody know far enough in advance, and then we can begin planning it, October, November,
Yeah.
Thanksgiving Day, whoever wants to host us.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffers. We are now going to go into executive session, but before we do, I would like to thank all of you for attending tonight and thank those of you for speaking. It is now 7:42, and we will be going into executive session. Thank you.